Hello, welcome to Paris. This is EuroPCR 2018. This is PCR TV. My name is Nick West from Royal Papworth Hospital in Cambridge, United Kingdom, and I'm joined by my colleague, Alex Abizaid, from the Instituto Dante Pazinese in Sao Paulo, Brazil. We're here to continue the discussion, the hot topic about bioresorbable scaffolds, and this morning we're going to be focusing on bioresorbable polymer-based scaffolds, what is in the pipeline. So Alex, I think the first thing really to discuss is we've had a large bioresorbable polymer program with thousands of patients enrolled in it. There are many key learnings, and although the Absorb program has currently been suspended, what do you think are the things that will inform the developments in this field?
Thank you for having me, Nick. I think this is really an interesting topic, and it's not so difficult for me to understand now some of the failure modes of the first generation Absorb device. First of all, we started with a very bulky device, right? The strut thickness is 150. We knew nothing about technique for implantation. So I think that with a first generation device, which is certainly with big struts, with strut thickness of 150, together with a long resorption period, and the lack of good information about the technique to do a good job in terms of implantation, it doesn't surprise me a lot to see some of the failure modes essentially with more than expected thrombosis rates. So I think with that, after 5,000 patients enrolled in multiple studies and a lot of imaging to really better understand these failure modes, I think now we are a little bit more mature in this field to propose new ideas.
I think you're absolutely right. The technique aspect is something that's been widely taken up by all the novel devices that are beginning not only to come to market, but are being examined in first-in-man and early clinical experiences. So the technique really is one part of it. I hope we've learned those lessons to prevent the early failures. But what's concerned many people is that although we may be able to overcome those early technical problems, and I think most of us would hope and believe that once the scaffolds have gone away, there may be fewer clinical events. What we have is that issue in the middle between the early insertion, the implantation, and before the device goes away. Now, some of the benefit may come from changes in the device itself.
Yes.
Now, I know you know a lot about these devices. You've used many of them in your hospital. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about the different devices that are going to be available and why they are different to the Absorb scaffold and why that may be beneficial.
I think this is a key question because there are 4 or 5 features that we certainly want to see in these next generation devices. The first one and the most obvious one is certainly to decrease the strut thickness. I think that to have a thin or almost metallic-like struts and well implanted, well embedded into the vessel wall, it certainly is going to be a good prevention for late events. So number one is strut thickness, and all of these new devices are incorporating that. The second is to program the resorption and the degradation time to be certainly shorter than the typical 4 years that we saw with first generation. Because of course, after 1-2 years, we don't want to be more dependent on depth. So that's something that we conquer already with the metallic world, right? The other feature that I think it's going to be important is to make these devices a little bit more visible, or to have good radiopaque markers so we understand where the device is being placed, and then we also understand the quality of the implantation without the dependence of so much imaging modalities. So that's another feature. Keep the good radial force early on to avoid the negative remodeling. Be a little bit more resistant to fracture, so we can be a little bit more aggressive in terms of post-dilatation and optimization of implantation without paying the price of structural damage. So I think those are some key points that I would like to see in this next generation devices.
I think you've mapped out really what the ideal BRS would be, but the reality is, unlike metallic drug-eluting stents, which now are all very similar, perhaps with the exception of biodegradable polymer coatings, the BRS field, every device has different and unique properties. And I think although you've mapped out very nicely what the ideal BRS would be, polymer-based BRS, I think it's probably unthinkable to think we're going to get all of those in one neat package, certainly at this stage. So I guess my next question to you is, in terms of the things you've spoken about, how soon are we likely to see these in clinical trials, even with either CE or FDA approval?
It's difficult to foresee precisely, but I can tell you that we have at least 4 viable programs that went through the early phase of first-in-man, and they are now more close to phase 2 kind of study for CE approval. Some of them, like Dissolve, Phantom, is already approved here. Meres, very interesting technology, and Amaranth, they are close to get approval in Europe. So I think that after this early phase, with a lot of imaging, we have to build studies, randomized studies, and we're no longer going to be confined in the first year. We want to see non-inferiority at first year for sure against the best-in-class metallic stents, but we're certainly going to have to wait 3 to 5 years to start to measure the real benefit of these new devices. I think if we're going to go through this first phase, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, because then we're going to start to really measure the benefit at long term.
I think you raised an excellent point, and 3 to 5 years, I think some of us may even think that would be optimistic. It may be longer than that. But I hope what we've spoken about today really is that we have learnt that there were some problems with us. There were technical shortcomings in the implanters, and I speak for myself and probably for yourself also to a degree. Yeah. We've learnt those lessons. We hope that we can, to a greater extent, get rid of that. And we're now hoping that with newer generation devices, with added features that we've learnt would be beneficial, the future will be very rosy, and as you say, we should strive for non-inferiority early, with the rosy future of perhaps superiority at a longer term time point.
Couldn't agree with you more. The combination of good technique and newer generation devices incorporated most of these features. I think that we're going to have a successful field.
Thank you very much indeed.